The Galactic Council's chamber was silent, a heavy, oppressive silence that hung over the room. The representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species filled the vast hall, seated in their high-backed chairs, their eyes fixed on the human envoy standing at the center of the room. Admiral Annabel Wells stood tall and composed, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes unwavering as she met the council's gaze. Her team, standing just behind her, had a similar expression, focused, determined, but ready for whatever came next. Before them, the Supreme Chancellor Ryak, a towering figure of the Vahani species, leaned forward. His glowing red eyes studied Annabel, as if searching for any sign of weakness. He was the leader of the Galactic Council, the one who held the power to decide the fate of entire species across the galaxy. And right now, his eyes burned with impatience. "Admiral Wells," he began, his voice deep and commanding, "the Galactic Council has extended its patience. But now we have given you our ultimatum. Submit to our authority or face the consequences." Annabel didn't flinch. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. The weight of the room, the tension in the air, was nothing compared to the battles humanity had already fought and won. The Council had made its demands clear. The humans were to bow down, to accept the Council's rule, or face a galaxy united against them. For centuries, the species of the Council had ruled with an iron fist, but they hadn't counted on humanity's strength. "We will not submit," Annabel said, her voice steady, though inside, her heart raced. She had rehearsed these words in her mind 100 times, but now, saying them out loud, they felt like the most important thing she would ever utter. "We are not your subjects. We are not your tools. Humanity will fight for its freedom." The room fell deathly silent. The other representatives, creatures of various forms, from the cold Elris to the monstrous Vahani, watched her, their expressions unreadable. The tension in the room was thick enough to suffocate. Annabel knew this was a gamble, but it was a gamble humanity had no choice but to take. Ryak's gaze never left her. "You misunderstand, human," he growled. "We are the rulers of the galaxy. The Council has seen thousands of species rise and fall. And you, Earth, are no different. Your resistance is nothing more than a fleeting spark. You have nothing to stand against the combined might of the galaxy." Annabel took a slow breath. Her team stood behind her, their faces calm but resolute. They had known this was coming. The Council had underestimated humanity's resilience, but now they would see what Earth could truly do when backed into a corner. "You mistake our defiance for weakness, Chancellor," she said, her voice unwavering. "We don't need to conquer the galaxy. We need only to survive. And we will survive, by any means necessary." The Supreme Chancellor stood up, his towering form casting a shadow over the room. "Do you understand the gravity of your words, Admiral?" Ryak's voice was like a low rumble, his red eyes narrowing. "The consequences of defying the Galactic Council will be catastrophic. You will lose everything. Your people, your world, your entire species." Annabel didn't back down. "We have already lost everything before," she replied. "Humanity has faced extinction. We've been pushed to the edge, over and over again. And each time, we come back stronger. We have fought wars, lost wars, but we have never been broken." A murmur rippled through the room. The other council members exchanged glances, some uncertain, some intrigued. Annabel knew the council had seen what humanity had done in the past, how the Earth had rebuilt itself after near destruction. But they still didn't fully understand what made humans different from every other species they had encountered. The Vahani general, Vakor, leaned forward from his seat. His reptilian eyes glowed with a mix of contempt and curiosity. "Your kind has survived, yes, but for how long? How long can your fragile species withstand the might of the galaxy?" Annabel met his gaze. "We will withstand as long as it takes. We won't stop until we have the peace we deserve, even if we have to fight for it." Ryak's voice dropped, cold and dangerous. You still don't understand, do you? This is not a fight you can win. The might of the Galactic Council has crushed empires larger than yours. Your world is nothing compared to the power we wield." Annabelle knew the gravity of his words, but she also knew they had one advantage, something the Council didn't understand. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their numbers, their weapons, or their fleets. It was in their willpower, their determination to survive, to protect what mattered most, no matter the cost. "Then we will prove you wrong," she said firmly. "We are not afraid of you. We will never surrender. Not now, not ever." For a long moment, the room was completely still. The Council representatives exchanged tense looks. Some of them seemed troubled, as if they were starting to realize the gravity of their mistake. Others, like Ryak, remained unmoved, their confidence in their power unwavering. Then, slowly, the Supreme Chancellor straightened up, his face a mask of cold anger. "So be it, Admiral Wells. You have made your choice. The Council's ultimatum has ended. You will learn the price of defiance." With a final, commanding gesture, Ryak signaled for the meeting to adjourn. The doors to the chamber opened, and Annabelle felt the weight of the Council's decision like a physical blow. They had rejected peace. They had chosen war. Humanity's fate had just been sealed. But Annabelle knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. As she turned to leave the chamber, her mind raced. She had no idea what the next move would be, but one thing was clear. Humanity was about to show the Galactic Council just how far they were willing to go to protect their freedom. The galaxy had underestimated Earth before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Humanity's vengeance had just begun. And no one, not even the most powerful beings in the universe, could predict what would happen next. The Galactic Council had made their ultimatum clear, but humanity was far from intimidated. Admiral Annabelle Wells and her team left the chamber with the weight of their decision heavy on their shoulders. They had refused to bow, refused to surrender, and now they knew the consequences would be dire. As the Council's ominous words echoed in her mind, Annabelle's thoughts were focused on one thing: Earth's survival. They had already made their mark on the galaxy by defying the most powerful alliance in existence. But now, the real battle would begin. Back on Earth, in the quiet shadows of underground bunkers and hidden laboratories, humanity was already preparing. For years, they had known this moment would come. They had been studying, building, and silently strengthening themselves, all while the Council had underestimated them. They had kept their best weapons hidden, kept their true potential secret. Now, all of that was about to be revealed. Annabelle's voice was calm, but her heart pounded with the realization that the moment of retaliation had arrived. The fleet was ready, humanity's best ships, each equipped with technology the Council had no knowledge of. They weren't just fighting with brute force. They were fighting with ingenuity, with tactics that the Council would never expect. The first wave of ships, cloaked and silently positioned in deep space, were ready to move at a moment's notice. Annabelle stood before the large holographic map of the galaxy in her war room, her eyes scanning the locations of Council strongholds. She knew where to strike first. Disruption, not destruction, was the key. If humanity was to survive, they needed to destabilize the Council's operations without engaging in direct, all-out war. Her team, a mix of the brightest minds humanity had to offer, was already at work. Engineers, strategists, and military commanders all collaborated in perfect unity, their focus unwavering. Every second counted, and Annabelle couldn't afford a single mistake. The Council's reaction would be swift and merciless, and humanity's actions would have to be precise to ensure survival. The fleet would need to strike first, hit hard, and disappear before the Council could retaliate. Each attack would have to send a message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Across the galaxy, the Council was reeling from the human response. The news of their defiance had spread like wildfire. Even some of the Council's most loyal factions began to question their power. No one had expected humanity to resist. They were too small, too young, too divided, the Council had thought. Yet now, their own underestimation had led to the first seeds of doubt in the hearts of their own members. The galaxy's rulers were no longer united. There were whispers of dissent. There were those who thought the Council had made a terrible mistake, and now they feared the consequences. It wasn't just Earth they had to worry about. It was what they had awakened in the hearts of every species that had been oppressed under their rule. The first strike came silently, an attack on one of the Council's vital supply depots. It was not an overt declaration of war, but a calculated strike at the heart of their resources. Humanity's ships, cloaked and nearly invisible to the naked eye, descended upon the depot at the far edge of Council-controlled space. With precision, they disabled communication lines, wiped out key logistical systems, and left the facility in complete disarray. The attack was swift, efficient, and left no trace of its origin. By the time the Council realized what had happened, the ships were already gone, and the damage had been done. Annabelle watched the newsfeed from Earth, her lips pressed into a tight line as the reports came in. This was only the beginning. A few attacks wouldn't be enough to shake the Council's foundations, but it was a start. Each attack would build on the last. Each move would further destabilize the power the Council had held for centuries. The Galactic Council thought they could control the galaxy with fear, but humanity's defiance was a spark that threatened to turn into a wildfire. As the first wave of attacks unfolded, Admiral Wells and her team knew that they were on the edge of something huge. The stakes had never been higher. They were no longer negotiating with the Council. They were fighting for survival, and every decision now had the weight of human history behind it. But there was one thing Annabelle knew for certain. Humanity would not fall. Not to the Council, not to any force that stood in their way. They had faced extinction before and come out victorious. This time, they would fight smarter, not harder. And the Council would soon realize that the humans they had once dismissed were a force to be reckoned with. In the cold vacuum of space, humanity's counterattack was just beginning. Each strike was a message, each move a step closer to shifting the balance of power in the galaxy. The Council had made its mistake by underestimating Earth, and now it was time to pay the price. Humanity's vengeance had begun, and nothing would stop it now. The Galactic Council had been on the receiving end of humanity's first strike, and now they were scrambling to respond. As the news of the surprise attack spread, panic began to ripple through their ranks. The normally composed and powerful species who made up the Council were suddenly on edge. They had never been so openly defied by a species so small, so young, and so seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The Council's initial dismissal of humanity's strength was starting to look like a grave mistake. Supreme Chancellor Ryak, furious at the breach of their authority, summoned his closest advisors for an emergency meeting. The faces around him were tense, some already questioning the decision to issue the ultimatum in the first place. Ryak, however, remained resolute in his belief that humanity would be crushed. This was only the beginning, he thought. But even as he spoke to his advisors, a flicker of doubt appeared in the back of his mind. The initial reports of the human strike had been troubling. There had been no trace of the attacking ships, no signature, no data trail. How were humans able to pull off such a coordinated attack without leaving any evidence behind? The Council's resources were vast, their fleets the largest in the galaxy. Yet the disruption had been so precise and so well-timed that it left the Council wondering if humanity had a hidden advantage they had never anticipated. But that thought was quickly dismissed. The Council had to stay strong. The order was clear. Humanity must be made to submit. They had no choice but to show the galaxy that defying the Council was a foolish mistake. While the Council dealt with the growing panic, Annabelle Wells and her team were already planning their next move. The success of their initial strike had given them a surge of confidence, but they knew it was only the beginning. The Galactic Council was massive, with thousands of fleets, millions of soldiers, and resources beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. A single strike wouldn't be enough to make them bow. They needed to hit harder, and they needed to do it before the Council could retaliate. Annabelle's war room was alive with activity. Her team was a mix of military tacticians, engineers, and analysts, all working together to figure out the next move. Their task was not simply to fight the Council's forces, but to destabilize their entire infrastructure. The strikes had to be well calculated, targeting key systems, communications, supply chains, and vital galactic hubs that kept the Council's operations running smoothly. If they could disrupt these systems, they could force the Council into a state of disarray. Only then would humanity stand a chance. "We need to keep them guessing," Annabelle said, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. "They'll expect us to launch direct attacks on their fleets, but we can't afford that kind of conflict yet. We need to cripple them from the inside out. Take out their resources, mess with their logistics, make them feel the weight of every mistake they've made." Her eyes narrowed as she zoomed in on the next target, a supply depot located in the heart of Council space. It wasn't heavily defended, but it held strategic importance. If humanity could disable it, the ripples would be felt throughout the entire Council. "We move in fast. Take it out and disappear before they can respond. We have to keep them off balance, always one step behind." The plan was risky, but it was their only option. The more they could disrupt the Council's operations, the better their chances of surviving whatever the Council might throw back at them. The humans were used to fighting impossible odds. This time, they would fight with strategy and speed, not strength alone. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was bracing for what they believed was an inevitable retaliation. Ryak ordered his forces to prepare for war. Every fleet was put on high alert, and every resource was funneled into the military. Their first mistake was underestimating humanity's willpower. Now, their second mistake was thinking that humanity could be crushed easily. They had underestimated the resolve of a species that had survived countless battles, internal conflicts, and wars that threatened their very existence. In the quiet moments of reflection, as the Council mobilized its forces, a small group of Council members began to question whether war with humanity was worth it. Some argued that the galaxy had no need to crush Earth. Perhaps they could offer a compromise, a peaceful resolution. But those voices were silenced quickly. Ryak, with his deep-rooted pride, would not allow such thoughts to take hold. "Peace with humanity," he scoffed. "They must learn their place. No, the only way forward is through force." On the ground, Annabelle and her team were already preparing to execute their next strike. The first one had been successful, but this next one would be even more critical. They needed to show the Council that they could strike anywhere, anytime. They were no longer the weak species the Council thought they were. They were a force that could change the galaxy's future. As humanity prepared for their next move, the Council continued to tighten its grip on the galaxy. But no matter how many resources they gathered or fleets they deployed, they were about to face something they had never accounted for: the undying resilience of humanity. And soon, they would realize just how costly their arrogance had been. The countdown had begun. Humanity had made its move. The galaxy's fate was about to change, and the Council's mistake would soon become their downfall. The tension in the Galactic Council's war room was palpable as they scrambled to assess the damage from humanity's latest strike. The first wave of disruptions had been successful, but what followed next was something the Council hadn't anticipated. Humanity wasn't going to wait for their retaliation. They were taking the fight straight to the heart of the Council's power. Every single time they struck, it was with deadly precision, leaving no chance for countermeasures. And it wasn't just their fleets that were at risk now. It was their entire infrastructure. Admiral Annabelle Wells knew the risks. Humanity couldn't afford to waste time or resources, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Every action they took now had to be sharp, decisive, and without mercy. The next target was a major supply depot in the very heart of the Council's territory. It wasn't just about sending a message anymore. It was about forcing the Council to stop and question their own strategies. The humans weren't supposed to be this effective. They weren't supposed to be this organized. But in the wake of their latest attack, the Council was beginning to see something they had never expected. Humanity wasn't just a threat. They were an unstoppable force. On Earth, in their underground command centers, the situation was tense but focused. The strike on the depot had to be flawless. Intelligence gathered from previous strikes had shown that the Council was beginning to fortify their most crucial supply lines. The Council wasn't stupid. They'd begin to adapt. They knew the humans were on the move, but what they didn't know was where humanity would strike next. The element of surprise was humanity's strongest weapon now. Annabelle stood before a holographic display, carefully studying the layout of the target. Her eyes scanned the map as she gave orders to her top strategists. The supply depot was in a heavily guarded sector, but it had one glaring weakness: an exposed energy conduit that, if disabled, would bring the entire facility to a halt. It was a small, vulnerable spot that the Council had overlooked. They had underestimated humanity's ability to infiltrate and gather intelligence. That would be their undoing. As her team prepped the ships and gathered their resources, Annabelle reflected on the risks. A large portion of humanity's fleet would be deployed in this strike, and while their stealth technology had proven effective so far, they couldn't afford to be caught. If the Council somehow discovered their plan, it could end the rebellion in an instant, but the payoff was too great to ignore. Remember, this isn't just about taking out a supply depot, Annabelle reminded her team. It's about hitting them where it hurts the most, right at their logistical heart. If we cripple their supply chains, we cripple their ability to sustain this war. If they can't fight back, they'll have no choice but to rethink their entire strategy. The stakes had never been higher. The fate of humanity rested on these next few hours. Success would send a message loud and clear across the galaxy. Humanity was not only a threat to the Galactic Council, but they could outthink, outmaneuver, and ultimately defeat even the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. As the fleet powered up and silently moved into position, the enormity of the task before them set in. This was not just an attack. This was a declaration of war, one that would change the course of galactic history forever. If the humans succeeded, they would have dealt a devastating blow to the heart of the Council. The Council, however, would not stand idly by. Ryak, ever determined and angry, had been given new orders to wipe out humanity's rebellion at any cost, and he was prepared to go to any lengths to make that happen. Back in the Council's war room, the reactions were mixed. The initial shock of humanity's bold moves had left the ruling members stunned, but they were beginning to regroup. Ryak's eyes burned with anger as he watched the reports of their latest strike. "This is beyond insolence," he muttered to himself. "Humanity is pushing too far. They will pay for this." But Ryak's own confidence was starting to crack. The cracks in the Council's armor were no longer just theoretical. They were real, tangible weaknesses. Each new strike against their supply chains made it harder for them to maintain control over the galaxy. Each move the humans made was like a calculated wound that couldn't be ignored. Worse still, there were whispers in the Council about the possibility of negotiation. Some of the more moderate members wondered if it was time to reconsider. But Ryak dismissed these voices, ignoring the growing sense of uncertainty that was spreading among his fellow leaders. As the Council scrambled to maintain their dominance, Annabelle and her team were preparing for the final phase of their plan. The operation had begun, and there was no turning back now. The fleet had positioned itself just outside the Council's radar range, ready to slip past the defenses undetected. The energy conduit, a small but critical weak point, was within reach. Annabelle's voice echoed through the command center as she gave the order: "Initiate the strike. Disable their energy systems, and get out before they even know we were here." No mistakes. The fleet moved swiftly and silently through the dark void of space, their ships cloaked in stealth technology that rendered them invisible to the most advanced sensors. Every second felt like an eternity. The stakes were higher than ever. And yet, despite the risks, humanity had found a way to fight back, and they were doing it in a way the Council had never imagined. Moments later, the first explosions erupted across the supply depot's energy grid, lighting up the dark space with bursts of energy as the human fleet executed the attack. The Council's once impenetrable defenses were crumbling under the weight of humanity's strategy. The messages of terror rippled across Council communications. Their critical infrastructure had been compromised, and the full scale of the attack was just beginning to unfold. As the humans faded into the depths of space, their message was clear. Humanity was not afraid to fight back, and the Galactic Council, despite all their power, was beginning to realize that their control over the galaxy was no longer certain. The tide of war was shifting, and it was humanity that was holding the reins. The Galactic Council's response came swiftly, as expected. Within hours of the devastating strike on their supply depot, Ryak ordered an emergency council session. The severity of the situation was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Humanity had proven itself capable of not just challenging, but dismantling the very foundation of the Council's power. And with each attack, the humans were sending a message louder than any fleet of warships could. The Council was no longer untouchable. Ryak stood at the head of the meeting, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. His eyes scanned the faces of his fellow Council members, many of whom were now showing signs of concern. The smug confidence that had once been a constant in these chambers had been replaced by uncertainty. There were whispers among the more moderate factions, even some murmurs of resignation, as they began to question the wisdom of underestimating humanity. Some of the more aggressive factions, however, still supported Ryak's hardline approach. They believed that humanity could be crushed if the Council responded with overwhelming force. But Ryak's mind was clouded with frustration. How had they missed it? How had humanity managed to evade their vast sensors and slip through the cracks in their seemingly impenetrable defenses? Their ships were faster, stealthier, and far more capable than any intelligence report had indicated. Worse, they weren't just fighting. They were fighting with purpose. They weren't looking for a battle. They were seeking something bigger. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a revolution. They're undermining everything we've worked for. Ryak spat, slamming his fist on the table. And they've made it clear they won't stop until we bend to their will. This cannot stand. A quiet voice from the back of the room interrupted him. It was Valir, a respected but cautious member of the Council, who had voiced his doubts about the Ultimatum from the beginning. "Ryak," he said calmly, "perhaps we should reconsider. Humanity's strikes are not just tactical. They're symbolic. Every time they attack, they send a message, not just to us, but to every species under our control. If we escalate this any further, we risk igniting a galaxy-wide rebellion. More species will join their cause. We could lose everything." Ryak's eyes narrowed. He had never been one for diplomacy, but there was something unsettling in Valir's words. Humanity wasn't just an isolated threat. They had somehow tapped into something deeper, something that resonated with the other oppressed species of the galaxy. As much as Ryak wanted to crush them, he knew that doing so might spark a conflict that the Council could not win. But despite the warnings, the fire in Ryak's heart was too strong. He would not let humanity dictate terms. "We've tolerated their defiance for too long," he snapped, his voice laced with venom. "If they want war, they'll get one." Across the galaxy, humanity was gearing up for their next strike. Admiral Annabelle Wells stood at the forefront of the operation, her mind focused on one singular goal: taking the fight to the heart of the Council. They had successfully crippled the Council's supply lines, but now they needed to go further. They needed to shake the Council to its core, and that meant striking directly at their leadership. The next target was a highly guarded Council stronghold, a central hub that controlled communication and military strategy across vast regions of Council space. It was heavily protected, more so than any of the previous targets, but Annabelle had spent months studying the data, looking for weaknesses. Humanity's success so far had been based on exploiting those weaknesses. This time, they would strike when the Council least expected it, during a time of internal division. Annabelle turned to her officers, her face stern but resolute. "This is our most dangerous mission yet, but if we succeed, it will be the end of the Council's reign. They won't just see our strength. They'll understand that humanity cannot be silenced, cannot be crushed. We are the future." Her words echoed in the room, stirring the hearts of the crew around her. The time for quiet resistance had passed. The Council's refusal to acknowledge humanity's defiance had given them the edge they needed to fight back. Now there was no turning back. They were committed to their cause. Meanwhile, on Earth, the entire planet was preparing for the largest uprising the galaxy had ever witnessed. The strikes against the Council had united not only the human forces, but every faction, every military and research group that had once kept to themselves. The world was rallying together, united in a common goal. Humanity would no longer bow to an oppressive empire. The message was clear. The Galactic Council's time had come to an end. As Annabelle's fleet moved into position, the tension was almost unbearable. She stood on the command deck, watching the stars twinkle ahead of them, the vast unknown of space before her. The success of their mission hinged on complete secrecy. If they were detected before they struck, the entire fleet could be obliterated. This was no longer a war of soldiers and ships. It was a battle of minds, a game of strategy and stealth that would determine the fate of not just humanity but the entire galaxy. The first wave of ships, cloaked in near-invisibility technology, advanced into Council space, approaching their target with the precision of a predator. Annabelle's pulse quickened as she watched the holographic map of the area. Every calculation precise, every movement planned to perfection. Time seemed to stretch on indefinitely as the fleet moved closer to its target. Then, without warning, the silence was broken. The energy shields of the Council's stronghold flickered, and the first wave of explosions lit up the darkness of space. Humanity had struck again. The Council had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. With each strike, the balance of power shifted ever so slightly. The Galactic Council's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and humanity was ready to take its place. As the first wave of explosions rippled through the stronghold, the message was clear. Humanity's vengeance had not only begun, it was inevitable. The Council's reign was over. The explosion at the heart of the Council stronghold was like a lightning strike in the darkness of space. Powerful, sudden, and devastating. For the first time, the Galactic Council felt the weight of humanity's wrath. As the shockwaves rippled through the station's energy grid, alarms blared across the facility, and automated systems scrambled to reestablish control. But it was already too late. Humanity had breached their defenses once more, and there was nothing the Council could do to stop it. Admiral Annabelle Wells stood at the helm of her flagship, watching the unfolding chaos through the large observation window. The once mighty Council stronghold, a symbol of their control over the galaxy, was crumbling under humanity's assault. The surprise strike had been executed with flawless precision, and now the Council's command center was in complete disarray. As the shockwaves reverberated through their systems, their communications network went down, and their forces were left scrambling to reorganize. Status report. Annabelle's voice was steady but filled with tension as she awaited the update. Direct hit on the main communications hub, Admiral, her officer reported. All their encrypted channels are down. We've isolated the core of their command. The outer defenses are still holding, but it won't last long. We've knocked out their long-range sensors. Annabelle nodded. This was exactly what they needed. Complete chaos. If the Council couldn't communicate, they couldn't mount an effective defense. The next move would be critical. "This is our chance," Annabelle said firmly. "We move now, while they're disoriented. Target their fleet command centers. Let's keep them off balance. We have one shot at this." As the crew moved into action, Annabelle couldn't help but think about how far humanity had come. Just a few years ago, Earth had been a fragile, divided planet, with no hope of challenging the might of the Galactic Council. Yet, here they were, taking down the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever seen, one strike at a time. Humanity was showing the universe that they were not just survivors. They were fighters. And the Council had underestimated them at every turn. In the chaos of the attack, a single transmission slipped through the Council's scrambled communication network, one that Ryak hadn't expected to hear. It was from Valir, the moderate voice who had warned against escalating the war. His message was brief, but its weight was clear. This is the beginning of the end. The rebellion is spreading. Even if we destroy humanity, we will never regain control of the galaxy. We must find a way to negotiate before it's too late. Ryak's fist clenched as he read the message. He was furious, not just with humanity, but with those who were now questioning his leadership. Valder's words echoed in his mind, but Ryak refused to acknowledge the doubt creeping into his thoughts. No, there would be no negotiation. Humanity had started this conflict, and now they would pay the price. The Council would not bend. "Prepare the fleet," Ryak barked to his officers. "We're launching a full assault. Humanity will learn that defying the Galactic Council has consequences." Meanwhile, on Earth, the atmosphere was electric. The news of their victory over the Council stronghold spread like wildfire. Humanity had dealt the Galactic Council a blow they would never forget. But the battle was far from over. The rebellion was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than ever. The next step would be the hardest, bringing the fight to the Council's core and forcing them to their knees. Humanity's fleet was now battle-hardened, their tactics sharpened by every strike and every victory. They had learned quickly, adapting to the Council's strengths and weaknesses, and using those insights to stay one step ahead. With the Galactic Council now in full retreat, Annabelle knew that they had only one chance to finish what they had started. They had to take out the Council's remaining strongholds and ensure their complete defeat before the Council could regroup and launch a counteroffensive. The humans had already succeeded in crippling the Council's communication networks, but now they needed to go after their most vulnerable targets, the Council's military fleet. If they could strike at the heart of the Council's war machine, they could bring the conflict to an end once and for all. But the risks were immense. The Council would be expecting a direct attack now, and they would have fortified their remaining positions. The humans would need to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than ever before. Annabelle's fleet began to regroup, their ships hiding in the shadows of deep space, waiting for their orders. The final strike was near, and they had one last chance to break the Council's iron grip over the galaxy. They couldn't afford to fail. In the Galactic Council's war room, Ryak and his most trusted advisors convened for what could be the last time. They were running out of options. The war was spreading beyond their control, and humanity's guerrilla tactics were eroding the very foundation of the Council. The time for negotiation was gone. There would be no surrender, no compromise. The Council's reign had to end now, or they would lose everything. "Ready the fleet," Ryak commanded, his voice low with rage. "Humanity wants war. We will give them war. And we will show them that no one, not even the humans, can stand against the might of the Galactic Council." The final battle was about to begin. It would be a clash of titans, one that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Council had underestimated humanity at every turn, but now they were about to feel the full force of human ingenuity, courage, and resolve. For humanity, this was their moment. The rebellion had reached its zenith. The message had been sent. No longer would the Galactic Council rule with an iron fist. Humanity was prepared to fight until the very last breath, and the Council was about to witness the true power of a species that would never back down. As Annabelle Wells' fleet prepared for their final strike, the galaxy held its breath. The end was near, and everything would change forever.